You cue me. Hello, LabVIEW friends and colleagues. Welcome to this edition of LabVIEW Live, a community user group. My name is Jeremy Marquis. I've used LabVIEW for 25 years. I'm a certified LabVIEW architect, professional instructor, and LabVIEW champion. And those that know me know that I love getting the community together. I've organized many community events and conferences over the years, and now we've gotten to go digital with LabVIEW Live. I am the engineering technical lead at G Systems, an NI Gold Alliance partner, and a turnkey systems integrator with a focus on test and measurement, especially in aerospace and defense, energy, RF, and biomedical. We specialize in designing and building turnkey test systems, technical consulting services, and production and assembly capabilities, which are especially helpful during the stay-at-home orders that we're currently under. All right, so about this event. So let me tell you how this is going to work. We encourage interaction with your speaker and amongst yourselves. So please use the chat. If you are watching this in an embedded stream on the page sent in the registration email, click the link to go to the YouTube site so that you can see that live chat. Once you're on the YouTube site, if your video is low resolution, YouTube has reduced it. You can switch it from auto resolution to a manual setting by using the gear icon in the bottom right of your video window. And one last thing, we will be officially ending the session cleanly so we have a good recording for others to watch in the future. But we will continue the discussion and Q&A even after we do that clean close. So please stick around if you want to continue that discussion. All right, in today's topic, we're discussing how to create no-install web interfaces for your applications using your familiar G development environment and customizing and extending it with an entire web ecosystem. Here to talk about that is Darin Gillis, Agile Product Manager at NI. Darin has led many innovative projects over the years, including LabVIEW NXG Web Module. He's presented the power of WebVIs at NI Week and the CLA Summit, and the tech is continuing to grow. He's also a pretty charismatic guy, so I hope you enjoy this. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to him.
Right, Jeremy, thank you for the introduction and setting the bar impossibly high. So today, I really want to get into first just a little sample of what WebVIs and the NXG Web Module are, and then I want to really have some fun with it, and I hope you'll enjoy going on this journey with me today. I am currently the product owner at NI. I'm an NI employee. I'm making day-to-day decisions for the Veristan product and the NXG Web Module. Again, if you have a question, put it in the chat, and I'll get flagged down, but I don't see it immediately, so there may be a bit of a delay, but I'll try and get to it eventually. All right, then. So first, we'll just get a quick primer in on the LabVIEW NXG Web Module, and really just take you through a whirlwind experience of creating a modern web app and get that hosted on the web. And then again, we'll have some fun with this and really push your idea of what VIs can do, hopefully to a different place. If you feel excited about trying this out in your projects. So to start with, let's think about what this is for, put it in context. The use cases we're thinking about in NI with the web module, we're trying to address people who have to share engineering data with remote colleagues, or in the case of coronavirus, be entirely remote and be able to do your engineering work from home. So doing that away from the office is important, as well as being device agnostic. So a thin client technology is really what helps us do that. It means you can use your desktop computer, you can use a Mac, an iPad, a phone, maybe someday a watch, I don't know. The point is, when we're using technologies, we're choosing technologies, we want to use things that go everywhere and not have all these limitations, such as big plugins you may have to install. We don't have any of that going on in this web module technology. My thought is looking at people who would be at this LabVIEW user group is the people here probably are pro-level LabVIEW people, so I'm not going to dwell on LabVIEW things in the language too much, but I will talk and assume that you don't have a lot of web development skills, and I'll try and fill in some of the gaps that you may have in that knowledge. I presume you also don't have a lot of time to spend on nice to have things. You have a certain amount of engineering time to spend on your projects and are consumed with getting a lot of that taken care of, as well as money, another resource. So it's hard to find time to experiment with new technologies like this. I'm glad you can join me for this webinar, and hopefully we can get you to the point where this is not a big expensive endeavor to experiment with a web UI. So what is the product that we have? It's the LabVIEW NXG Web Module. It's an add-on to LabVIEW NXG. It uses the LabVIEW NXG editor, but the important thing is it plays nicely with regular LabVIEW as well. The idea is that you can use your existing LabVIEW application to keep doing whatever it's doing, and then shovel that data over the network to a web server, and that web server can show your web UI and your data in a nice way and efficiently share that UI either in an intranet local area network situation or on the global internet. And we're pretty excited that we also released this capability for free in the LabVIEW Community Edition. So all the demos I'm going to do today are from the Community Edition software. You can just go download that from ni.com and run and go to town with it. The thing you can't do is you can't use it for business purposes. So you can use it for hobbyist use cases, but if you really want to use it for your engineering system, you really need to buy the LabVIEW NXG Web Module and get a good license there. But I think there's plenty of cool things you can do around the house with this as well. Now back at NI and the teams I work with, we have a charter, sort of a mission statement. So I just wanted to share what we're thinking about when we're working on this product. We think we're trying to bestow web technology powers upon everyday LabVIEW users. And we're doing that by helping them build applications for accessing and exploring data anywhere, anytime, with any device. And we think that's going to help you make better insights and better decisions in whatever application you're working on. And that's really what is our North Star for the work that we're doing. In meme form, really we're trying to do more of the making you fly like Superman and less kind of fake Superman going up the escalator sort of thing. Let's start with just getting into a basic WebVI demo, what you're going to see when you download the Community Edition of LabVIEW. So I went on and launched this. Now I'm just going to go ahead and pick an example to start with. I'm going to go over to my Learning tab, find the Programming WebVI section, and there's a bunch of different examples here. I'm just going to pick this one that shows multiple top-level WebVIs. What that means is it's going to have basically a few different web pages that it generates, and there'll be links to create sort of a website. So we'll just kind of call it my site. We're going to load that up. And if you're unfamiliar with the NXG editor, I'll just orient you a little bit. Your project pane is on the left. Your VI is in the middle. It has a panel. It has a diagram with code. It has an icon for if you're going to call this as a sub VI. And when you select things in the middle, you get a configuration pane on the right that tells you how to configure that object. So I've clicked a link, and I can see that when I click this link, it's going to navigate to engine.html. Okay, cool. There's also other panes in the bottom that will pop up at various times to tell me various details as I need to know them. So what do I do with a VI when I want to run it? Well, I click the run button. All right. I'll do that, and it says, this is what you're going to see the first time you try and launch Community Edition. It's going to say, hey, you need a web server, and we don't see one right now. So you can follow the button that we give you here. It'll take you to a place that says, hey, how do you want to host your WebVIs? There's a couple different options. We'll just leave it on the default, which is a good situation to be in. Use the NI web server. It's currently unconfigured. I click this button. I am getting a user access prompt right now that you can't see. I have to be an administrator of the machine to pop this open. That's what happened here. But I get then the NI web server configuration UI. And we present you a number of options. This web server is pretty flexible. It'll let you do regular HTTP and unsecured communication. It'll let you do HTTPS, but you need a certificate for that. You can make a self-signed certificate. I'm not going to bother with that in the demos today. If you're just experimenting on your local machine, you can just go ahead with simple local access. That's going to be what you want most of the time until you're ready to deploy this somewhere, and then you're going to want to try these other options out that help you tweak some of the options in the web server as you go along. So I'm going to click Set for Local Access. It does make you set a password. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a password. You have to enter it in twice. And you can also hook it up to your Windows accounts if you want to. And it'll say, I'm going to go ahead and open this up on the standard port 80 hit finish, and it's going to go ahead and start up a web server locally. And when I come back to the product, I can see that now it says my web server is running, which is great. That was a one-time sort of setup that you'll have to do on a new machine. But once you've done that, you kind of forget about it and never have to do it again. Now, if I run my WebVI, I run it, and it's now doing things. So I can go ahead and click on these links. But you'll notice that, like, I click on this link, it's saying to navigate to a page. Well, like, what does that mean? I don't have that page open right now, so it can't navigate me anywhere. So that's interesting. How do I view this in the context of how a real user would see it? Well, in a browser. Well, right next to the run button, there is a little drop down here, and you can choose to run it either locally, where you have kind of the environment around you, you configure things more easily, or you can go down here to the browser, and you can say run in the browser. If I click run in the browser, it will make me save my project, which is fine. It's going to do a little build and quickly just bring my WebVI up in a browser page. And here I've got, I'm just going to go ahead and navigate through these. These are all individual WebVIs in my project. Show you those. Each of these WebVIs is a different page. And as I click through here, go back, click through the different pages, you can see these are all various just kind of manufactured data that we're showing you. And this is just kind of a temporary deployment, so you can kind of iterate on your code and get the UI looking right. We have different UI elements, and I'll go into a lot more detail on the kinds of things in the WebVI eventually. So there's kind of your nickel tour of a WebVI present. I would say any questions, but I think we'll just deal with that in the chat and the Q&A at the end. I do want to point out one thing. I did show it in the browser, so I hope you believe me that it's HTML based and JavaScript in the background. Well, you can directly get at this data too. We have a button here to let you get at the HTML source. And what we do is we generate a preview of what that page is going to be. And we use, like, font coloring and such to make it more readable. You can go in here and you can add information. You can customize this in the HTML if you want to. If you got one little thing you want to tweak, you can make that tweak here. In this case, I'll just add some spaces, hit OK. It will persist that change as long as it's not just white space, and it'll keep that along. So you can jump back to your familiar LabVIEW place to do dropping of controls and indicators. I can drop buttons and controls. I can go ahead and make diagram code that interacts with those controls, and that is not a problem. Right? Do your standard LabVIEW stuff, which I'm not going to go into here. So that's kind of a primer on things. I'm going to go ahead and close this project and jump back to slides. Sure, save that. All right. So what are the use cases for test? When do you want to use a WebVI? And I'm going to talk about the 4 buckets we've kind of come up with and things we were thinking about when we were designing this product. The first is remote monitoring. So obviously, if you have a long-running test, you have a battery test that's running for several days, and it's expensive to lose time on that test. It's good to be able to log in with our mobile device. This is kind of a crude example where we're just watching some temperatures on some kind of a water pump. That's a thing you can do, as well as remote control. So if you have maybe you want to trigger a test to run on some remote machine, but you want to do it from your iPad, from your poolside villa. I don't have one of those. I should get one. In this case, you can open up your iPad, click Start Test, and you can go ahead and trigger that activity. You can also, do things like pop open simple message boxes from the browser as well, and as well as doing things like data entry. I'm going to call out Jeremy Marquis of G Systems here. I'm just going to show an example they made more than a year ago now with some of our earlier releases of Web Module, showing how you might build a production test results browser. And if you want to learn more about that, you can follow up with that link there. That's more of a data entry thing. We're entering in information about your device under test. And then as you're testing through, sort of like a test stand style execution. Another case is data exploration. So you might have a lot of data you've gathered and collected that in a TDMS file or some other database. And you want to then parse that and derive insights from that data, but you don't want to have to sit in front of your computer all the time. To do that, you can take that data, get it up, sling it up to a WebVI, and then you can have a more device agnostic experience looking at your data and do some other neat tricks. I'm going to show a little example of how this works as well. So those are the four main use cases. Now, how does this all work, right? Well, the short answer is it's just HTML and JavaScript. Take my word for it, right? And what that means, though, is that we basically just have some very simple files. You need to be put in a place where the web server can access it, and now you're doing all the things that any device that can reach the web can do. All devices tend to know how to interpret JavaScript and make that work. Now, what we're doing in the web module specifically, if you look at a WebVI, on the top, on the left side here, I have a panel, and on the bottom, I have the diagram. You can show these in split view, so I just did that here. What we do under the hood is we take that panel and we translate that into HTML and CSS. CSS is the styling language you can use to apply to a web page. And I said, I showed you can get at this data as well directly right from the editor if you wish. But the diagram part is actually handled differently. We generate something under the hood called VIA. It's just a text file. It's a text language that then we have a little JavaScript engine that's open source. You can find, if you want to search for Vireo on GitHub, you can find the engine yourself, and you can see how we run our engine, and then we just run these VIA text instructions that get generated from our code. That's just a little peek of what's going on underneath the hood. You don't have to worry about VIA, and for the most part, you don't have to worry about HTML and CSS until you want to do something fancy. Really, the things you need to think about are these major components. There's like four pieces here to meditate on. The first is your test system, right? Your test system can be built however you'd like to build it. You want to build on LabVIEW, fantastic, and I would love that. NXG, we'd love it even more. But if you want to use C#, Python, or whatever, we have a lot of different options for you using any of those methods. And from your test system, you have to then communicate your data up eventually to the web application, but first to some kind of a server that will host that data. And the hosting piece, we have a lot of different options. I'll talk through the ones that NI endorses, and that can be a piece of hardware. It can be something IT sanctioned in a rack in a closet somewhere. It could be your Dell development PC. It could be something on the cloud. It could be all sorts of things. The point is, you're just serving up these very simple HTML and JavaScript files, and almost any web server can handle that sort of thing. The third piece is the web application itself, and that is the part you would develop in LabVIEW NXG Web Module. That's what will then run on the devices that load those pages. Now let's look back at the hosting and kind of dive into that a little bit. What are your options here? So one, you can use a local web server. So if I just want to use my own PC, I can just go to the start menu, type NI web server, and you'll find, boom, right there. That's the tool that then launches the web server. This web server is installed with a variety of different NI software packages. It installs with LabVIEW NXG Web Module, installs with the Community Edition. It even installs with LabVIEW 2020 as well. When you launch that thing, you'll go through a setup experience that I already kind of demonstrated to you, and you've seen that in action. Now you can also use our LabVIEW application web server. What's nice about this web server is that though it doesn't have the full featured set that a web server offers with all the security elements and a lot of the user identity stuff that you can dial in certain web pages or load certain users, having a login mechanism. That's great. But if you're just running on a CREO with limited resources, you may want to just use the application web server and host your WebVIs from there. And that is something you can definitely do. And there's a UI you can do that. I just have a screenshot of that. As well as anything really you want to do, you pick your favorite web server. I'm showing you here maybe what you would see if you use Microsoft IIS, which is what comes with Windows 10, Windows 7. You can install this component and just have Windows launch a web server. And you can use that. Really, the key thing is you have to get your files copied from wherever they're built on disk over into wherever the root folder of the web server is, and you are mostly good to go. I call that IIS because there's also, you have to add some MIME types. I can follow up with a link about that if you're curious in the Q&A. You don't need it most of the time, but if it's for IIS in particular, you need to add some special MIME types to say, hey, these kinds of files, this is what I do with them, tells the web server what to do. It's very simple little edit. You can also use things like Amazon Web Services, right? And go in the cloud and host these up there as well. And that is not a problem. We, of course, at NI have our own cloud hosting solution. So another option to think about is System Link Cloud. If you bought the NXG Web Module, you paid money for that, you will get a System Link Cloud license and subscription. So this will be available to you. And what's nice about the cloud hosting is you can do your development. Basically, what you do is you take your WebVI, you build it into a package, and then you take that package and thrust that up onto the System Link Cloud server. And now, from your phone at a Starbucks coffee shop, you can pull up that web module, built WebVI, and deal with your engineering data. Pretty cool. Now, if you didn't buy the web module, let's say you're using Community Edition, you don't have that System Link Cloud for free, that subscription, you can do a 6-month trial. So, I mean, that's plenty of time to play with it and try it out. I recommend you give that a shot as well. Okay, so that's hosting. Let's talk a little bit about the data communication side of things. There are a lot of different options here. I'm just going to touch on some of them, show some interesting things you can do. The first one that I would recommend to people is if you're writing some sort of a dashboard that you're going to monitor live data with, then, and as data updates are going to be relatively infrequent, you're just looking at some slow moving thing like temperature data, you can do system link tags. System link tags are going to give you pretty good, easy to use latest value. It's a good trade-off for easy to use versus the kind of data types that make it easy to work with. And it's also interesting with the word system link in that API name, it is important to know that you don't have to buy system link. You don't have to be a system link purchasing customer in order to use these APIs. If you bought the web module, you can use system link tags, and the next thing I'll show is system link messages without a problem. And same with the system link file upload and reading capability, which I will actually demonstrate in a little bit. So system link tags can put a lot of different data types up to your WebVI. One interesting case recently came up in the forums was we had a customer that wanted to take a VI front panel and just take an image, snapshot of that, and slingshot it up to a web page. So they can just kind of have a read-only snippet of their web code. And so we're actually able to build that. It's not that hard. I'll show you the code for it as well. But here, just once a second, it's gone ahead and I'm taking a picture of that image, of that VI, and just putting up there where you can now view it from anywhere in the world. Interesting. The code for that fits on 2 slides. This is the LabVIEW 2020 code. There's just some setup stuff here on the left. You take your VI, you get the image, you encode it, and you write it to a tag. And then you close the tag. And that's it on the sending side. On the receiving side and the WebVI, the code is pretty standard as well. You open a connection to your server locally. You tell it what data you want. You read it once a second, and you update your page. And that's it, right? So it's pretty interesting to me anyway. So that's tags. You can also do things with system link messages as well. System link messages are better for sending little commands around. These commands will get queued up, and then you can deal with them on the WebVI side without too much trouble, or on the other side of your system if you're sending like a test start message. It's really more designed for low latency, whereas the previous example was more about latest value and bigger data chunks. That works pretty well. And then I will talk in length about uploading a file to your web server. And then that's what you want to do if, let's say, you have a data logger, a compact reader data logger. You're recording all sorts of data. You have 2 megabytes of whatever kind of voltage data, and now you want to do that data exploration. What you can do is you can take the format of the file you logged. If you logged it in TDMS, that's great. You can upload that to NI Web Server and then build a WebVI that consumes that and displays that information. So let's talk about that, and I'll show you a little neat thing you can do with that data using some more advanced techniques as well. So I'm gonna come back here to the product. I'm gonna go ahead and let's see, I have this open from last time. Let's take a look at what I have here. So I'm going to open this up. I have a number of different these components. I didn't touch on this earlier, but all WebVIs have to be in a component. One of them has to be an application. It's a web application type component. You can also have libraries as well. So this particular application, I have several libraries that implement different things as well. my code is relatively simple. I basically read waveform from my server, and I'll show that on a graph. And then I have an event structure here that looks for this button press. And when I push the button, it's going to offer to let me download my data as a JSON string. First, let's focus on loading the waveform from the server and see what happens. If I just run this thing, what's going to happen? Oh gosh, nothing. That's a bummer. My demo failed. Or maybe I planned this. I wanted to show off quickly how I get a TDMS file data up to the web server. Now, there's several ways to do it. You can do it programmatically. I'm going to show what this looks like locally. So if you have the NI web server running, you just get to it from localhost. Just type that in your browser. You give it your credentials, password I set earlier. And then once I'm logged in, I get this really simple screen here where I have the different services I have available in the NI web server. I have a tag viewer where I can see tags that I have deployed to the system. I have a file viewer. And there's also a cloud element here, which I'm not going to talk about today, but it helps you coordinate sending data back up to system link cloud if that's what you're trying to do. Since I'm trying to take a data file, I'm going to go ahead and go to the file viewer. I'm going to look here, and I have no data files. That's what's going on here. I also get this banner that says that I'm not licensed. What that means is I haven't bought System Link. So there's certain things I can't do here. Like I can't open a really fancy TDMS analysis tool. But hey, good news is I don't need to do that. I can still do a lot of other things, such as uploading a TDMS file. So I'm going to click the upload button. I'm going to find on disk something here. I have a couple that I have saved off from past explorations. I got this waveform TDMS file. It's 400K in size. It's uploaded. I'm going to close that. Now I have this item up inside the server space, so it knows about the file. It's there now. So now that the server knows about the file, I should then be able to write my WebVI to read that file. So if I come back here, I'm going to run my WebVI again, and it should find some data. So now it actually pulled the data from that TDMS file. Let's take a quicker look at maybe the code, at how that works. And I'll zoom in a bit here. First, I have to open a connection to the local web server. It's interesting to know that when you're doing development in the editor, you really need to provide your credentials here on your diagram. This is not great security practice. So you have to remember then to go back and delete these username and password items from your diagram. You don't want those in clear text hanging around for people that try and like decompile your WebVI or something. If you remove these, and it will work, but you can't then do the in-editor running like you might want to. But basically, once you get the connection open, there's an API here to go ahead and find the TDMS files that are uploaded. I can come here and find that file ID, open the file, read the file. I just read the first 500 pieces of data from that file and send them to the graph. Right? So this is not a very complicated piece of code. Now, that's how I get it on the graph. That was just this little chunk of code here. Let's talk about what's going on in the middle a little bit. So I thought it would be cool to be able to download this data as a JSON file, the raw stuff. So what I do is I have a little chunk of code here that takes my waveform, unpacks it, and reconstructs it as a JSON string. What's going on there? And then I have this node that just lets me download the file text. And this node is special in that if I keep drilling down, I'll eventually find that there are calls here that are actually not VIs at all. That's because they're calling JavaScript to do these things. And I'm going to go into detail about what is going on with this kind of technology. But if you want to see it in action first, if I click the download button, it's actually not going to do anything for me because I'm not in a browser. It's not showing me where the downloaded files are. So I really need to do it in a browser for this to make a lot of sense. I'm going to go ahead and run this in the browser. It's going to open up here. And I got my same data. I'm going to hit download, and you'll notice here that it actually is creating a JSON file. I can download this a bunch of times if I want to. Every time I click that, if I open this thing, it's going to use whatever editor I have associated with this kind of file, which I think is VS Code at the moment when it pops up. And you see I have some raw data here, and this is just a big JSON string. let's do the text wrapping if I can find text wrapping quickly. And for you, that is a lot of data. So numbers. All right, so that's just a little hint at the JavaScript plugin ability that I'm going to now go into more detail on. But hopefully you can get the gist here. Okay. What other options? There are other options, of course. You can also do communication with a LabVIEW web service. This gives you a lot of flexibility, but also with great responsibility. Wait, with great power comes great responsibility. That one. It's very flexible, but there is a lot going on in there. LabVIEW web services are a little more advanced than what a WebVI is out of the box. So you're going to have to learn a little bit to get that going. However, we know a lot of people have LabVIEW web services deployed in real systems already. And if you do, that's fantastic, because writing a WebVI that talks to an existing web service, pretty good. So you'd be in good shape. You basically just use this HTTP API on your WebVI, and you can do all your get and post requests to retrieve data from your web service. Now, I do say that web services that are built returning JSON responses are a little easier to deal with on the WebVI than ones showing XML, which I think was the default until LabVIEW 2020. So just be on the alert for that. There's also WebSockets. So WebSockets is a little newer of a technology to work with. It's an internet standard, and it's really intended to be for streaming live data. It is a client-server API, and we have built in a client API into the WebVI. So we have this palette for WebSockets. It's just open, read, write, close, really straightforward. But there is a server component to this that needs to be out there publishing WebSockets in order for the WebVI to read it. Now, there's public data sources. Like I wrote a WebVI that read the latest price of Bitcoin and showed that. And though cool, probably better if you had more interesting data, more on topic. Now, we offer through partners the ability to have a server-side WebSocket through LabVIEW, also through NXG. There's a variety of different implementations out there. I personally have tried some of the BD Mongrel stuff, and it's worked pretty well. So WebSockets are great for streaming data. That's kind of the gamut on data communication. And in general, kind of closes off my prep you for all just the basics. If you're still with me, thank you for hanging in there, because now it's going to get a little more fun. I want to get out there and try some more exotic things. So I want to show you flexible layouts, how you can get a WebVI to look differently on different shape, size screens. So you want to look on a mobile device that's long and thin, an iPad is long and fat, a desktop screen that's a bazillion pixels. You can do that sort of thing. How you can apply custom styles, and then again, these third-party JavaScript plugins, which really unlock some interesting capabilities. So let's dig into this with some live demo, shall we? So I'm going to show off flexible layout. I'm going to show off styling a panel, and I'm going to then show you some more advanced stuff as well. Okay, so I have a demo here, and what I've done is I kind of have a panel that I'm taking through various stages. It's like the Easy Bake Oven. So we're going to start at the beginning with our raw ingredients here, maybe. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to include this stage 1 version of my software. I do have to tell NXG that it's going to be intended to run on the web server, so I have to drag it over there. But that's it. Now I've got my kind of first version of my panel. And this WebVI is not super interesting. It's just making some fake data, looking at some coolant temperature, and I can set some limits that move around. I can update these limits. And there's a little alert thing that will change colors if the data crosses over the limit, as you might think it could. Make it happen, great. If I chase a random number around, it might eventually happen. You never know. Okay, good, it has a warning. There's an image up here. There's a tab control. There's some other stuff on this other screen. There's some links to other places. There's some text controls. I did a lousy job aligning the text. Yeah, so that's just the basic. This is the raw clay on the spinning table. So we have some work to do. So first off, let's look at it in a browser, and let me show off one not so great thing about this starting point. And one is that when I shrink the window, it obscures part of the data, which is a bummer. So That's not going to look great on a phone. You're going to spend a lot of time trying to position things in a funny way. So how do we fix that, right? Well, there is an answer. Close some of these up. We have added a feature in LabVIEW NXG 3.1 to have this panel layout mode. And what you can do is you can switch from absolute layout mode, where it has literally an XY coordinate for the control, to flexible layout mode. And when you do that, it may do something you find scary, but it took all your controls and hid them. They're all still here. They're just hiding out in the unplaced items tray, which is fine. And then you can drag these things out. And when you drag something out, you'll notice that like dragging things out looks a little different. You get this kind of funny blue bar, and that's all you got. Once you drop something, you get this rectangle that goes around the object as well as the object itself. And it's a little tricky to click, but once you click this thing, you can see some more about it. This is a container, and this container has settings of its own. You can change interesting things about that container. It's a container, so you can obviously put things inside of it. You can put things to the left of what you put down. You can put things to the right of what you put down. And most interestingly, you can also like create a second container. It's kind of tricky. You can go to the right side, maybe where you shouldn't think you should be able to drag anything, and you can drop something over here to make a second container on the same row. And now you can kind of split up, who gets what part of the real estate. And vertically, it does more of an automatic calculation. So you're really positioning things in these boxes and get your boxes horizontally set up right. You can obviously make new rows of things, rows of buttons, no problem as well. And you can't select to move these containers. They're just part of the document. So that can be a little tricky. But once you get used to it, you really can build some pretty cool stuff with this. Pretty common. You've seen things like this when you go to build web pages in WYSIWYG tools online, or try anything like that. Anyhow, enough of me playing around. I'm going to show you what it looks like once you're done, and it looks nice. I'm going to go ahead and go to stage 2 here and show you what that looks like. Stage 2 is I've just taken all that stuff out, and I actually got everything positioned correctly. And if I run it, it still works. If I want to test out what happens because of the resize, I can go ahead and run this in the browser. So we'll do that. And here you can see some interesting things happen. So when I shrink the window, it doesn't obscure any of the controls, and some of them shrink and grow as needed to certain limits. You can set these limits for minimum width, minimum height. You can set which ones stretch and which ways to some degree. And your tab controls still work. You can still lay things out. This one's really helpful. You can imagine looking at this on a phone. You're scrolling through data. Yeah, so that's an improvement, it's fair to say. Okay, so we made a little improvement, but we still have some kind of ugly things here. We can do, what's the next step look like in making this into a sexy UI? Well, let's take a look at the formatting options we have. So there's a lot of things built into the editor already, so that's the first place we want you to look. If your text is not aligned right, like for instance, I think numerics align to the right and text aligns to the left by default. Yeah, you can change that. You can go over here and align these things, which is fine. You can change things like your label colors. You can change your fonts to be whatever you want. That's not a problem. But there are some things you can't do for the configuration pane. So one of those things is, let's say I don't want the user to be able to go in here and type. I want to populate this read-only. How do I disable this control? Well, there's not like a checkbox for that at present time. It might make sense to add one, but we haven't added one yet. Now, what you can do, though, is you can go ahead on your control, you can create a reference to that control. And we have some property nodes you can use to change things this way. All right, so in this case, these are the kinds of things I can do programmatically. One of them is disabled. So sometimes you can find things that can only be done with the property node at runtime. And I'm going to disable my control. When I run this thing, I'm going to find that I can't interact with that data anymore. So if we apply that through and through, just kind of clicking through things, doing those sorts of bits, changing my fill colors and such, let's see what comes out in my next iteration of this panel. I'm going to include stage 3, and let's take a look at that. So here, got some different colors applied. I've kind of changed some of the layouts and alignments. I got my text aligned. So that's cool. Not too bad. All right. So let's say I want to do something that I can't do via property node. I can't do via the configuration pane. Classic LabVIEW answer is, sorry, wait until the next version of LabVIEW. Well, with the web module, that is not the case. We have the ability to drop out into CSS and customize this. So I'm going to go try that out. I do have a CSS file on disk here. I'm just going to go find it. And let's just say I'm going to copy this into my stage 3. Let's just open it and look at it first, maybe. What's my style look like? So I'm going to make a CSS style. This is a brain dead, stupid CSS file. There's not much going on in here. For those who don't know CSS, the really quick answer is you have to tell it what things you want to style, and then you tell it what the rules are to style it, and you put those in brackets. And then you tell a web page where that style CSS file is, and it does it. In this case, I'm saying anything that has this demo text class, and I want you to go ahead and say, hey, make the NI indicators background color transparent. So what that should do, if I did this right, is that this text box, if I add this demo text class, the background gray color will go away. So you're like, I'm done with all the gray of NXG. This is the salve for your complaint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this into my web component. In general, maybe a good thing to do if you have multiple of these styles is go ahead and make a CSS folder. You don't have to do that. More of a best practice sort of thing. So I've added that. I'm going to refresh my project. I can see the folder I just made and the CSS file that I just added. I'll go ahead and include that. And if I double click it, well, I just get the same file. Not very interesting. That's part of what you need to do. The other piece is you have to label your control that you want to be modified this way. So I'm going to come over here to my my string control. And I notice that for WebVIs, all the controls have this HTML class attribute option here. And what I can do is I just paste in this demo-text. Now, one interesting thing to make sure you catch on to, I did not put a dot on the front of that. When you're in WebVI, you don't put the dot. When you're in your CSS style, by virtue of the way CSS works, you have to put a dot on the front. A common mistake to make. This just tells CSS this is a class. I'm looking for an HTML class attribute. Whereas over here, we already know we're talking about HTML class attributes, so we don't make you put the dot. So just a little pro tip there. So I've done this. You would think, gee, wasn't that great? Fantastic demo. It's still gray. What are you doing? Well, there's one more step here. So just because I have a CSS file in my project and I have a control that's labeled correctly, I have to tell the WebVI that this style rule exists. And the way I do that is I drop into the HTML editor, and I have to add a special tag to the head section. And I will show you easy ways to look this up later. I'll just tell you what it looks like right now. It's a link tag. You tell it I'm adding a style sheet, and my location of the style sheet is just in the CSS folder style.css. And if I haven't done any typos, I hit OK, and I come back, and lo and behold, my gray is gone, and now I have these white background string controls. So, that's like a really, really simple targeted thing. Some questions you may have. Hey, Darin, that's cool. How on earth did you know what the heck this was? Well, there's a couple ways to find out that. There is one, looking at the documentation. In this case, I'll show you a link to this later, but I'll pull it up now. So basically, we have a guide, make this big, on GitHub in our WebVI examples for doing CSS work. And we give you a little song and dance about what CSS selectors are and how you talk to them. And then we have a whole bunch of rules down at the bottom here that tell you how to put a drop shadow around your panel, how to set the minimum width height of the panel, how to round the corner of a button, things that we don't give you today. So is this like all the style rules you can apply? Absolutely not. It's just ones that whenever we get a support call and someone's trying to do something around the corners on a button, in addition to answering their question, we also want to write it down somewhere. And so we've been trying to capture that. One little gotcha with the CSS styling. Well, NI is under no obligation to make sure that that CSS style works version to version to version as we make changes. It's quite possibly break compatibility here and there. And we'll do our best effort to capture this on this GitHub guide if that ever becomes confusing. But for the most part, you should assume when you upgrade versions of Web Module, your style rules may need some tweaking. But you're going to have a way to do it. It's just a matter of like we change the syntax perhaps from here and there. So that's one way to figure out, read the documentation. Another way is you could just go into your browser, run the WebVI, let's make it small again, and explore on your own. So there's some stuff built into a lot of modern browsers. I'm going to look at Chrome. The details are largely, they vary a little bit, but the basic principle is the same. There's usually something called developer tools in your browser. You can find that. And it gives you all this stuff. It's like a whole IDE, like wrapped up into a little pane of your web browser. And it tells you all sorts of things. You can come over here and select this indicator and say inspect. And it will tell you, where that thing is in your HTML code. You can go up here and find new performance information. Somewhere in here, there's a console, which I'll show you a little more about later. You can actually interact with this thing at runtime and type and call JavaScript functions directly. The thing I'm looking for is the styles. So here I can find, hey, here's some particular NI control ID. And I can say, oh, it has a false background. It has a false background color, NI-foreground color. So I can go figure these out on my own. And if you want to, you can go change some of these live. And I think it's reflected right there in the page as you diddle around with these settings. I can, sometimes it's easier than others. It was easy to find this color. Sometimes there's many layers of styling that go on. So, not for the faint of heart, but if you're, really wanting to take your WebVI to the last mile, I think this is a great option to have on the table. Let's look at what my example looks like after kind of getting to the end game here. And let's see how good I can do. So here's my example of using the new NI branding with the new NI green, which of course we all love. And here I've also added some buttons here. So if you look at this on an iPad or something, you can just tap the corners of the iPad screen and you can look at your dashboards and things. You can click buttons. My text controls look a lot different now. And yeah, so you have multiple of these kind of things to page through. All right, so that was styling and flexible layout. Let's get back to the rest of things. Again, I showed you this page. This is information about how to get CSS style rules that are commonly used. And you can find that up on GitHub. I believe some of these links are going to start showing up in the chat on YouTube. Thanks of Meredith to that, typing those in. So if you want to paste from there, go for it. Okay, so great. I love this all. Hey, by the way, Darin, I can't debug a WebVI. What's the deal with that? Right, so we don't have probes and breakpoint support right now. It's something we're thinking about, obviously. But there are some things you can do in the meantime to debug your WebVIs. I'm going to show one little tool here that one of our team members made. It's actually posted as a code example in ni.com's code example pile. There's a bit.ly link to it here called Debug Tools. What he's done here is you can drop these little basically temporary probes into your code. In this case, he's labeled each of his loops. And when those loops execute, those messages are getting logged to the output pane of the editor. And then you can also filter on these things and kind of get down to the things you're interested in as well. What's really cool about this, though, is it doesn't work just in the editor, it works in the browser as well. So again, you're leveraging some of these developer tools over here in the browser, which in Chrome's case are in the tools, pull right. And in that console area I mentioned earlier, you can see these loop 1, loop 2 messages are getting stuck in there as well. So that's pretty handy, we think. I hope people get some mileage out of that when trying to debug WebVIs. You can also take your WebVIs and do as much development as you can on the desktop where you have the full probes and breakpoints, and then copy your code over into WebVI. The diagram code is largely compatible, and you shouldn't have a hard time doing that either. So I really want to hit on this topic of JavaScript library interfaces, JSLI, as I call them. And it's really for taking your WebVI diagram and connecting it to JavaScript libraries that exist in the world. Maybe you wrote the JavaScript, most likely you haven't, or you just wrote like a few lines here and there. And you can get really incredible results with just a few lines of JavaScript, I'll tell you that. I'm gonna really get into that. First, I want to tell you what a JSLI is. This is what a JSLI document looks like if you break it apart. In this case, I have a library component representing a calculator as calculator functions. I happen to have an add that I love and a multiply implementation that I love. They're written in JavaScript though. How do I get into, I have a nice LabVIEW interface to those JavaScript functions? Well, you write this document, JavaScript library interface. The main part of the document is about configuring the name of the JavaScript function and the parameters and return types of that function. So I have an add and a multiply. And as a result of configuring this, I can drag and drop nice sub-VI looking entry points. But these aren't really sub-VIs, these are really calling the JavaScript functions under the hood. Now there's some detail here about the HTML script and link dependencies section. The way JavaScript works, you often have to put these little script tags into the top part of your web page, into the head section of your web page, in order for it to know about the JavaScript files. So what we've done here is we've kind of bundled that into this interface document so that if I handed you my calculator library G component, you never have to know there's JavaScript inside. We look there and say, oh, you're calling this thing, we're going to stick these tags in your top level WebVI, you'll never know the difference. And so this is a pretty great abstraction, we think, that we're excited to use. In terms of the different pieces of data you can pass, we support Boolean, strings, numerics, arrays, and then the new one we just added with NXG 5.0 is the JavaScript reference, which really unlocks some really amazing, potentially cool things. So I will demonstrate shortly. Other JavaScript things you can do, you can call in-browser functions, built-in JavaScript things, logging, math. You can do more advanced things like promises. I'm not going to get into that because that will require helping you understand what JavaScript coding is like, which is hard to ooch into. I want to talk about some magic tricks. So if you're still with me, this is a time to tune in. There's a GitHub page up here that my friend Milan has posted. He has a lot of examples he's just built over time, and he's posted them up on GitHub where you can actually just click on them and launch them as needed. Some interesting things you can do. He's built a little rich text editor example where like, yeah, this is a WebVI, but it's got the ability to type in crazy text, and you can do all kinds of rich text formatting and things that you want to do. Coloring, you put links, and no problem. And then you can generate some more advanced output there. It's pretty interesting. You can kind of poke in this more on your own if you want to. Another thing, you may have a desire to pop some like more fancy dialogues to tell you something's gone wrong in your application. There's this thing called Sweet Alert. Here's an example of one, just a really simple thing. You give it a message. You can prompt people, okay, cancel. It's got this nice little pop animation, and there's really like a ton of functionality in it. I'm not touching on what all these little levers do, but you can put emojis in here. You can have animating things. You can have this like progress bar dialogue flying across the bottom, and it just misses at the end of that. Pretty neat set of things that are really easy to leverage. And this is all JavaScript powered. This isn't something you have to write yourself. So you're leveraging open source software here to do really neat things, which is really powerful. Let's say you want to show a location. Okay, Google Map, sure. There's also an open source version of Google Maps called Leaflet. It's a little JavaScript tool. It gives you the equivalent of a map, and you can put markers down there. And here's a LabVIEW list box control, and it's just feeding coordinates into this chunk of JavaScript code and highlighting key points around Austin. You can do the same thing with Google Maps, but you need a license to do that. So maybe you don't want to do that. Really out there stuff. Let's get out there into the weeds a little bit. You want to have a virtual reality 3D mockup of your space. Like here's an example of doing that. You can go full screen with this in the browser. Now I'm navigating around some kind of Doom-like world where I can see my web module, my WebVIs. I can walk myself inside of a semiconductor test system and take a look at the inside if I want to. And that's pretty wild. Or maybe I'm just nostalgic to see the old NI logo again, and you can zoom back and see Nigel the Eagle and the NI logo, as you might want to see. Pretty weird and wild stuff you can do with this. And again, this is just a WebVI If I want to change this text, I can type my name, and woohoo, I can't even spell, but you get the idea. Pretty neat and powerful things you can do. And of course, another hot topic lately is machine learning. So I just want to quickly demonstrate there's some JavaScript machine learning stuff that's really interesting with TensorFlow.js. So this is one where if you upload an image, the WebVI will analyze that image and tell you what's in it. So if I go up here and I'm going to find my pictures folder, I'm going to go, let's see, some pictures I've saved. Let's pick, I don't know, this ladybug. I'm going to send it this ladybug picture. I say, open the file. The WebVI says, with 95% accuracy, I determined that is a ladybug, or a lady beetle, or a lady space beetle, or maybe it's a leaf beetle, or a birdhouse. You never know. That's some really wild things sometimes, just for fun. It's worth playing with this and just trying some different things. You can send it like a phone. See what it says here. I forget now which one. Oh, that's 97%. That was another good one. I'm going to refresh again. Let's try. I think the cactus it didn't do such a good job on cactus. Let's see. Oh, it's a 64% flower pot, bucket, thimble. Okay, not too bad. I'm pretty sure I can fool this thing. Let's give it chair. It's like, oh, well, it's a balloon and it's a table lamp and a bubble. I don't know. Machine learning is just weird and fantastic, and I don't know what to do with it yet, but I'm pretty sure unlocking the power of this in your day-to-day will be really amazing. So I encourage you to play with these experiments. Again, the link to this is probably in the chat. And the code for this is all posted up on GitHub. You can go poke around here and find the WebVI source and look for yourself how all this works. All right. One more great one. I encourage you to take the time to pull out your phone and zap this QR code and look in person. Your just normal Android phone camera app should be able to interpret this. You don't need a special QR reading app. I don't know on iPhones and such, but if you do this, you'll get some graphs, right? And I got some pie charts that NI did not write. You can also interact with the 3D graph there. These are all open source e-chart controls that you can wrap. And we have a whole library of them you can look at and see all sorts of really cool data visualizations, and just kind of go to town with whatever you need to do. It's really, really cool stuff. That is just the tip of the iceberg. There are a lot of other cool things you can do. You can take the result of the WebVI and run it in non-browser places. For instance, you can take your game of Snake you wrote in a WebVI and you can host it as an Office plugin if you wanted to. You can take your WebVI, you can build it alongside of Node.js and create your own server-side implementation that basically does the same thing a LabVIEW web service does, but it's based on a WebVI and runs with Node.js. That's pretty out there. You can also build your own Facebook Instant Messenger app. You can take that, put your WebVI in there, repackage it, and you can like and comment and share and become viral that way. And then I think it's maybe more practical for the everyday. You can build these little browser plugins that go in the upper right of your browser, in a lot of modern browsers, and run your code there. And what's interesting there is because you're not running in the sandbox of a web page, you're running on a plugin that was installed by the browser operator. It has access to things like files on disk, and your WebVI can now do file I/O, which is something that's not allowed directly on a WebVI running in a sandbox browser. So, really just all sorts of amazing things. And there's so many ways to go here. We're just kind of opening it up and saying, what will the community do? So really curious to see what people come up with. These are just some starter ideas. You can build your own Chromecast dashboard. I'd love to hear about it, and I'd love to see what you have to show. Now, I have one last demo I want to try and touch on before we run out of time. I will try to make it quick because I know we have covered a lot of ground here. I wanted to quickly show off a feature that is a preview feature right now. Building my own control wrapper and sharing it to someone else. I want to show you what that would look like. So as the author, I went ahead and built out this little library that shows sketchy controls. So this is an open source library that I wrapped, and you have a little slider. You can make the data look fuzzy or not so fuzzy. You can do pie charts, and you can change some basic things about this data. That was cool for myself. Let's say I wanted to share this with Jeremy. How would I do that? Well, there is a way to do that. And after installing my library, basically Jeremy just goes to his palette. He finds my sketchy stuff, and he can download this and just drop it on his panel. And then the only trick about it is that we have to drop this in a thing called an HTML container. It doesn't work exactly like a normal control. You have to right click on it and then create a reference to it. And then on your diagram, you have to then use the other side of the palette, the diagram side, to interface with this control and tell it what goes in that box. So in this case, I want to put a bar chart. I tell it, okay, my HTML container, put a bar chart in there. And then when I run this thing, it's going to fill in with a cool bar chart. So this is the sort of thing that's now possible. This feature is enabled. The ability to create these things is a preview feature. You check a box in here to let you build these sorts of things. But we think this has the potential to let people build really cool control sets and just kind of share them with the world, and we can really cause some really interesting things to happen in the world. All right. Hopefully you're now energized at WebVIs. There are a lot of resources here to go take the next step on your own. You can read more about the web module from links that are now going to be posted in the chat. They're shown here as well. You can look at our JavaScript samples on our WebVI experiments page. Look at the styling FAQ. There's also the last 2 NI weeks, we've done some pretty exhaustive deep dives, similar to what I've just done, but for previous versions of the NXG web module. And there's some bit.ly links there to access those recordings. Take a look at those. That's basically what I had to cover today, Jeremy. I want to hand it back to you. We can kind of dive into the Q&A section of this webinar. Thank you so much for your attention, and be well out there, people.
All right. So, Darin, I saw a question come in. Are there examples, WebVI examples for streaming a camera?
Streaming a camera. All right. Well, there are some. Let's take a look. Streaming a camera, it's actually harder than you might think. I think it might be. There are certain types of web cameras. This is really, really easy. Let's just pull up one from our example. Our example happens to use one that's really, really easy. In this case, this is a live feed of a webcam of some windmill somewhere. I don't know the details of it. But if you look more carefully at what's going on here, all this is what we call a URL image control. You can find these things in the decoration palette, and you can give it a URL. And that URL, you can point at a web camera. If it's a certain kind of web camera, it will just publish the latest form. I think it's MJPG type camera. Those are really, really easy. You can do other kinds of web cameras too, but it can get more complicated. I have a Railink camera that has some infrared stuff on it. I was trying to build up a little security thing in my garage, and I found that the images came back in like bursts because I had a newer version of this video codec or something. You know, as soon as you go into the different web cameras, all these codecs and all these standards, and it's a big alphabet soup to deal with. So, but I am happy to report I was able to get that to work, but I did have to apply some of my JavaScript library interface stuff, special sauce there to make that happen, to get the buffering right so it didn't flicker. So that's something we can definitely accomplish. It's sometimes easier than others. That's the long answer to your question.
Okay, well, so like I said, we're going to continue the Q&A, but first I wanted to thank our speaker, Darin. I want to also thank our live stream producer in the background, the man behind the curtain, and LabVIEW architect, Derek Bomarito. He's been answering questions on chat as well. If you have topics that you would like to hear about, or if you have a topic you'd like to share, please message me on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, and we can start a discussion about that. I would like to talk about our next session in October. I think this one's going to be a lot of fun. Brian Powell, longtime team lead for LabVIEW itself, will be joined by well-known LabVIEW veterans Fabiola de la Cueva, Steve Watts, and Jorg Hampel. They will be talking about what to do when you inherit a mess of LabVIEW code, how to improve it, and how to prevent you being the source for the next guy. Thanks for attending, and we will see you next time. All right, and now let's return to the Q&A. All right, so does anybody have questions? So I know we have, Darin is very knowledgeable. We have Rita on the chat. She's been on the web web module team from the outset, I believe. So we have some very very knowledgeable people. Let's see, Darin, on the WebVI camera view, are you able to zoom in on a published image? Was one of the questions I saw. It's a follow-up from Alexander.
I want to try to make sure I understand. I want to zoom in on it. So like in this case, it's webcam. Can I zoom in on the webcam? You can make it bigger. You can zoom the editor. If you mean like manipulate the camera itself, that would be, I don't know how that would work. Like operate the left and right and pan it and that sort of thing. I mean, you can do this sort of thing with your browser. Is that? I mean, that's kind of the limit that comes for free. Really, I did a great job on this WebVI, by the way. It's really nice. I have murdered this example. I'll go ahead and open the live stream so I can see this. If there's anything directly. No. I don't know, Derek. I don't know how to pull up the chat window myself, by the way. Advice on that.
That's no problem. I think we got clarification on the question that it's just a normal image viewing in a browser. Can you zoom into the image? I think you can just use the normal browser zoom.
Yeah, we don't really have like image manipulation capabilities. Though I imagine you could find a JavaScript library that does that. Kind of just tour through what we do have over here. You know, we have your basic program flow stuff, so for loops, while loops, case structures, all the different timing things, disable structures. We have queue support, different data types that you might expect. In terms of math, fairly limited. So we have basic math stuff. We do not have the analysis library, so we cannot do signal generation and FFTs and that sort of thing. Although we have done some experiments where there's some FFT stuff built into the browser. Actually, I think maybe a page about this. Yeah, let's see if I can find our experiments page, or which one of these it was, where we can do things like an FFT, this web audio thing. I believe it does it. I don't know if this will work because I'm doing the web capture. I have a button here I can capture from my microphone. In theory, this won't break the WebEx. Sorry in advance. Yeah, if I do testing, 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 testing. And you can see there that there's a live FFT being produced. And there's not WebVI code doing that FFT, but it's using the Chrome browser API to do an FFT in this case. So you kind of work with what you have when you're dealing with browsers as well. Can you still hear me on the WebEx? Okay, cool. Sharing microphones, that's cool.
And Matthias had a question. He said he was wondering if something changed between NXG 4.0 and 5.0 for hosting WebVIs and Microsoft IIS. He said that it seems that his NXG 4.0 projects don't work anymore in IIS after he migrated to 5.0.
All right, I think you're hitting on the thing I verbally alluded to, where on IIS, what happened is in Web Module 4.0, we adopted an internal technology called WebAssembly. There's files that have this .wasm extension on them. Let's see, there's a thread in the Champions forum that explains this. Hopefully I'm not going to take you on a wild journey, but there is a description of this. Let's see. I search for IIS. You can find this thing and share the details to you. I had a link in my presentation, but realized that no one else could see it, which is kind of a bummer. Let's see, MIME types. So basically, you have to add 2 special rules to your web server configuration. If it's a third-party web server, so that knows what to do with these guys. You know, it's going to take me a moment. I'll poke around and see if I can pull up the link to that. I'm going to have to like poke around in my email a little bit to give you the right answer. So bear with me. I'll take a look. Give you the exact steps here to make that work. But the good news is that WebAssembly is that it is much faster. We found pretty good performance boosts, both in terms of memory usage and speed. So that was pretty great. So we think it was a net win. All right, I'm close to the link here. And boom. Okay. Here is a little blurb about that. I'm going to scroll a little bit, try not to make you dizzy. So the answer here, the answer is shown in form of an animated GIF. Maybe that's a fine thing to do. No, hold on. Let me get to it. Darn, hold on. I keep playing. I wish I'll find your answer. That wasn't it. All right, quickly tie up in here before I jump to that. Here's a bit about how to add a MIME type extension. I think you need to add a WebAssembly type extension. You know, I still need to find the exact steps here. No, I think I do have an animated GIF for this slide. All right, here we go. Okay, you have to add something for this .properties file, and you just tell it it's a text plain file. And I'll just let this play and kind of talk about it, but you'll find once this thing loops over again, this is really having the answer that we're looking for. But you got to go into the .wasm files and these .property files. And once you add those 2 things, IIS should work fine. That is my experience with NXG 4.0 and later. Okay. Next question was, sorry, multiple WebVI view. I can't see the question.
Yeah. Yeah, Andre was asking, are there ways to sync multiple clients? User 1 updates a control and other clients are notified and updated, like similar to Office collaboration.
Right. So how do you make WebVIs in different sandboxes know about each other and talk? There are a few things you can do on that front. I am not an expert in this technology. I think the easiest thing to do would be to coordinate with coordinate to the central authority, like with system link messages, and then communicate to your your clients that way. But there are methods of doing this, I think, using local storage, I think is a technology. So we've done some experiments in-house where you can store things, store data in the local storage. So if you have like different tabs in your browser open, you could communicate data from tab to tab. It's like one idea. We've done some other experiments where we try and have more of a centralized server, and you can get at the instances that are attached to that, but that's a little more feature looking and nothing I say will work right now. So you can say that's something that R&D is looking into outside of the more concrete use case of just using messages to translate slingshot messages around.
Patrick Allen was looking for some guidance on how many connections a very small web server could support. He was asking if y'all have done any load testing on a local server to see what one host can handle.
All right, so what can a web server handle? That's a good question. I can say that I don't think I have the answer to your question. We don't, in my team, we don't really write the web server. So we don't stress test the web server. That wouldn't be our job. We have another team that handles the actual web server itself and how that works. There are a lot of different factors at play there. I do believe that if you're talking about something like a compact Rio, it cannot handle that many connections. I know we anecdotally heard, when you get past 10 connections to a compact Rio, there's not a lot of horsepower to spare on the embedded processor there. So that would be something to look out for. Now, the good news about that one is that if you go ahead and get a server grade machine or even just a desktop machine and you host your WebVIs from there instead, and you just have your cRio sending data to that centralized point, then that goes much better. So if you really need a good processor, you're going to be running a web server. But I don't have concrete numbers outside that little anecdote about compact Rio. I know we've used these on the NI week stage before and had like thousands of concurrent connections running, doing something simple. Again, all you're doing, the web server's only job is to serve up some HTML files and some JavaScript files, and its job is done. Now, if you start doing more exotic things like using our tags and messages and things, that's where I think we probably get back to some performance data on that. But it really depends on your style of data communication. Just running a WebVI, I mean, whatever the web server in question says it can do, should be pretty consistent with that.
Okay, we had another question. Is it possible to catch an event such as the action browser closed?
Okay, events. Well, we do have some event support. Let's take a look at what we got. I believe the short answer is we don't support that event. Let's take a peek. So we do have some panel events, and the ones that we have right now is this online status changed. So it's not an on-browser close, but what it can do is if you have a mobile device and you're looking at your WebVI, you got some graphs and things. Let's say you're walking around a test facility and you drop into a Wi-Fi dead zone, but your WebVI is still running, right? Maybe the data can't connect anymore. If the browser knows if there's an active internet connection or not. So what we do is you can monitor that event, and you can write code that says, like, if you're connected, do this, or have a status indicator on your panel if you want to. So especially if like you lost connection, you have a chance to like do something like show a message to the user, say, hey, you lost your internet connection, your data is stale. We're concerned about people seeing data and thinking it's live, but it's not anymore. So we added this feature, this online status change. We don't have one for the window closing. I also don't know a lot about the limitations of that in JavaScript. At some point, we're kind of beholden to what the browser offers. I'm not 100% sure that you get a chance to run code when you close a tab in most browsers. I could be wrong. If I had maybe one of my colleagues who's on the chat still perhaps can chime in if I'm wrong there. Sure.
Matthias wanted to know if you could share a little bit of the roadmap for the NXG Web Module, and if there's any new release scheduled for the future, for the near future.
I don't think I can share that right now. Sorry.
Okay, and Darin, I think I'm going to connect you with Matthias directly. He still had some technical questions about the 4.0 to 5.0 issue that he's having. And I think you know Matthias. He's been doing web tech in LabVIEW for many years. So he's definitely a veteran, and I am not able to follow his line of questioning.
Hi, Matthias. I didn't realize it was that Matthias. Hi, man.
Yes.
How are you? Thanks for reaching out on the web. Yeah, reach out to Rita and I, and we'll get you squared away. I'm not sure what the problem is right now. Sorry.
All right. I think I got all the questions. If I've missed anything, Derek's in the background. You let me know, and or feel free to just to repost your question if I've missed it.
Well, thanks for my email out there, guys. You didn't have
Okay. Well, if that is, thanks for sticking around, and we will see you in October.
All right, sounds good. Hopefully it's in person someday. You never know.